Welcome. Let's get this meeting started. I'd like to start out with item number 2, public comment. Do we have any public comment in the lobby? Okay, we have no public comment. Do we have anybody on the phone for public comment?
We don't have the phone lines.
Oh, okay.
We didn't receive any written comments either.
All right, so then let's move on to action item 3A, approve the February 3rd, 2021 minutes. I need a motion.
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 4 is information items. Brad, would you like to take over for that?
Sure thing. Good morning, everybody. And I see, good morning, Ron. I see you joined us too. Thank you for joining us. I think since Commissioner Long is on her way, I think we'll go ahead and, if it's okay, we'll start with you, Harry, and Steve, and we'll do the federal legislative update first, and then we'll finish off with all the action-packed Tallahassee stuff. So,
Okay, sure. Can you hear me okay, Brad?
yeah, go ahead, Harry.
Okay. All right, Brad. Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Good to be with you again this morning. And my colleague, Steve Palmer's on the call with us too. I guess the biggest probably news of since our last conversation, we discussed, I think briefly at our last legislative committee meeting, the increasing likelihood that congressional earmarks would return to the appropriations process this year, which looks like it's a pretty good shot now. We've forwarded to Brad and the PSTA staff guidance that we received last Friday from the Appropriations Committee on how they're likely to resume the congressional earmark process. And then on Monday, we received a copy of the form that Congressman Christ will be using to accept his projects. They're calling them community-directed projects now instead of earmarks, so that's the new phrase. So I think Brad and Steve and I had a good call on Monday to talk through some notional ideas for potential projects that might work. And so that's a good step forward. That'll help with some of your projects, accelerate some projects you have on your list. And the system's pretty flexible. So we'll continue to work with you. We're still waiting for the last guides to come out of the committee on which accounts they're going to earmark funds from. That'll help determine which are the best projects to consider submitting. And there's a deadline for Congressman Christ to submit projects to him by March 19th. So we have a little less than 3 weeks to get some things into him. We have not seen anything from other members. Congressman Bilirakis' form isn't out yet, nor Senator Rubio. We do have a form from Senator Scott. Although, just one caveat, that in the earmark process, both the House Republican Conference and the Senate Republican Conference currently have conference rules, prohibiting Republican members from requesting earmark spending. And so no determination has been made yet on what the Republicans are going to do, whether they're going to join with the Democrats in this new process or not. So we need to continue to watch for that. So but we should hopefully get some more information by the end of this week or early next week on that. With that, I'm going to pass over to Steve and give you some updates on what's going on with COVID relief, the outlook for the infrastructure bill, and a couple of nominees I think are continuing to move forward. So I'll pass on to Steve.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, commissioners. Just very quickly on the COVID relief bill, the American Rescue Plan, as you know, the House passed it last week by 6 votes on a party line vote. The debate will start today in the Senate, and it's under this reconciliation budget process, which allows final passage to be at 51 votes as opposed to the normal threshold of 60, which is what you have to have for a filibuster-proof margin. So the Democrats are moving ahead. There is 20 hours of debate. There will be, the unique thing about this bill is that debate is limited. It can't be filibustered, but senators can offer any amendment they want to for as many as they want to. So this weekend, we anticipate that they will be entering what you're going to hear called a vote-a-rama. And they will go through all of these amendments with no debate, and they'll take as long as they need to take to finish the bill. The bill will then go back to the House for final passage, as they will have to pass the bill with whatever changes the Senate makes. Like, for example, the minimum wage has been dropped out of the Senate version of the bill. With respect to transit, we don't anticipate anything happening with the $30 billion that's in the bill, $30 billion that's in the bill for transit relief. Last night, the Republicans were able to take the pound of flesh that they were looking for. There were 2 projects they were able to get the parliamentarian to knock out. Both were considered earmarks. As Harry talked about earmarks, and they're not yet back. That one was in California, was in close to Speaker Pelosi, and one was in New York. So Senator Schumer was the target of that. So I think they're going to leave transit alone. It'll survive intact. Again, the goal is to have that bill done by mid-March, March 14th, because that's when the enhanced unemployment benefits expire, and they don't want to let that lapse.
Right.
Just quickly on two other issues, Harry mentioned nominations. Today, the Senate Commerce Committee is holding a hearing on Polly Trottenberg to be the deputy secretary. There's still no date on Nuria Fernandez for her confirmation hearing. We expect that to come. They're going through the FBI background checks and all of that. So we expect that to come in maybe in later this month or early April. And I think that's it. Harry, you mentioned one other thing.
Oh, infrastructure, yeah. You want to talk about
Infrastructure bill. Yeah, we don't have a lot of details on the infrastructure bill yet. President Biden will come out and give an address to the joint session of Congress after March 14th, when the COVID relief bill is signed into law. We anticipate him outlining his bill, but again, it could be as high as $3 to $4 trillion and offset by tax increases. Obviously, if that happens, it no longer becomes a bipartisan bill, becomes one where they'll have to look at using this reconciliation process again. Just the only thing that's happened so far on the bill is the chairman of the committee that handles highway issues in the Senate said he hopes to mark up the highway title of the bill by Memorial Day. So things will be moving relatively fast there. They're looking for, they've asked entities for any kind of programmatic or policy suggestions that they want, not earmarks, just broad policy suggestions. So that process is starting, and we anticipate that's going to pick momentum on that's going to pick up later this month or next month. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to turn it back to you.
Thank you so much for that update, Steve and Ron. Very, very good. Thank you. Welcome, Janet.
Oh, thank you so much.
Our chairman is here, and would you like to take over?
Well, if you could give me 2 seconds.
Sure,
to get
take your
settled.
time.
In the
All
meantime, you don't-
all right, so Brad, do you want to move on to the state legislative update?
Well, first, I don't know, Commissioner, you have a question?
Well, my question is, I heard about the March 19th date. Where is our build grant request going to be
Right.
able to be put in? Is that still March, or is that in the summer?
So,
Harry,
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, go ahead,
I'll
Steve.
jump in on that. Yeah, I think interesting you asked that question, Commissioner, because staff had just sent me a direct note on the themes as well. So I think we expect that the notice of funding opportunity to come out from DOT sometime early next month. And at that point in time, then we'll work with the staff to put together the application.
Okay.
Yeah, and Commissioner, to your point, Harry mentioned that when we heard about this, the earmarks might be coming back, we had Harry and Steve and I had a good strategy meeting earlier this week, and then and it was after the staff had a really good discussion about how we can best be prepared no matter what happens with the earmarks, with this, as Steve mentioned, this potential for an infrastructure kind of package that could be even larger, and then there's been some more details on the earmarks, like Congressman Christ, that each Congress member, as Harry said, is limited to only 10, and that's not just transportation, that's all, right, Harry? That's like the entire government. They get
Correct.
10. Okay, so each congressional member has to have their own process, because they're gonna get hundreds of, like Congressman Christ and Bill Arakis are gonna get a lot, and then they have to narrow it down. So we have to then get our letters of support for, put together for Congressman Christ.
Yes.
Also, it's like another little mini process, all due by March 19th. So we came up with our three ideas for earmarks were either Clearwater intermodal, multimodal, something related to our efforts to go electric buses with charging stations or solar panels or some kind of project like that, or a big project that's on the MPO's and FDOT's timeline, a gateway transit intermodal center. somewhere here, it's been studied here in the Gateway area, a parking garage, et cetera. With talking with Harry and Steve, we felt like the Gateway Center was a little too far out there for an earmark, that the earmarks are gonna be small. They're gonna be in the order $1 or $2 million max range. And we felt like it would dilute our ability, it would send the wrong message that we're trying to get the build grant for the Clearwater Transit Center. That's still our number one, but because we're only gonna potentially get $1 or $2 million, what's scalable? Well, we thought the electric charging infrastructure. We could get a charging station in Clearwater or St. Petersburg, just depending on how it shakes out. It's scalable in that way. So I think what we're gonna ask Congressman Chris for is part of our countywide charging infrastructure and see if he can help with that. For the longer term, we had a good discussion about like this big infrastructure package. What would be what are the future corridors or bigger projects beyond Sunrunner in St. Petersburg after that? And you know, there has been some study of this by the MPO. So our corridor, our projects that we came up with were 34th Street, which is US 19. And the highest ridership portion of that is between Pinellas Park and St. Petersburg. Number 2 is 4th Street North, because the DOT has at least indicated they might be willing to provide us one of the lanes where the highway stretches out into three lanes north of 30th Avenue North. That could be converted into some kind of partial transit lane, maybe. Number 3, which has always been on our list, is a very high ridership, Clearwater Beach to the airport, to the Tampa International Airport. And then number 4 would be, and these are not necessarily in this order, number 4 was all the ferry system. The ferry system in Clearwater, Madeira. Waterborne transportation, the comprehensive package. Whether that could be packaged together in an exciting way for all of Pinellas, you know, if you know, money rains down from heaven. So we'll start kind of putting those together just in case something like that shakes out. But we'll just have to see on that. But I really appreciate Harry and Steve talking with me on that, and just to be ready for whatever we can. Yesterday we had our quarterly meeting with the Federal Transit Administration staff on Sunrunner. Now we have quarterly meetings with them to update them on the construction and the activities on that project. And Abhishek did a good job. He put in at the end, just to kind of keep them informed, and they were interested in our build grant in the Clearwater, in our next project, which is Clearwater. Not that they can express support for it or anything, but they asked some questions about it, which I thought was good. Good as well. So
is the build grant going to be coming out of the infrastructure bill, or is it already a separate?
no, it is. I don't know if Steve's still here. It's appropriated.
Brad, it's Harry. It's a discretionary grant program. So Congress funded it at $1 billion for the current year. So it's a discretionary, highly competitive, but a discretionary grant program that supports large infrastructure projects. They like them to be somewhat regional in nature. And we have shared the first large discretionary grant program out of transportation. The notice of funding opportunity came out last month for infra, which is a grant program that helps move freight around the country. But that was the first one with this administration, and we shared with Brad and the staff kind of the priorities for this administration, what they're looking at, the impact on climate, equity issues, vehicle miles taken off the road, using new technology, solar panels, that type of thing. So we think, Commissioner Albritton, that the Clearwater Transit Center would compete very well, and with some of the new criteria they've outlined for at least that program. If they carry that over to build grant, that would be good, we think, for the Clearwater Transit Center as being competitive this cycle. So.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just want to make sure we we check all the boxes that they'd be looking at, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, could I interrupt for a minute? Are you finished, Commissioner
Yes.
Albritton? Okay, Harry, I apologize that I missed the first couple of minutes of the meeting. Did you, and maybe you already addressed this, but if you didn't, I'm curious about when you talk about, excuse me, each congressman is allocated 10 potential asks for this money, correct?
Correct. That's a change. In the old days, when they earmarked back in before 2010, when they eliminated the earmarks, members of Congress could ask for an unlimited amount of projects. They could submit whatever they wanted to the committee. The new rules of the road, one of the new rules is each member can only submit 10 requests total to the Appropriations Committee. That's across all 12 of the bills that they write each year. So there'll be this internal competition within each congressional office of which 10 projects are they going to move forward. So, for instance, we were saying, Commissioner, before you came in, Congressman Chris released his form that entities will have to submit to make a request for consideration of an earmark. Then he'll have to take all those requests, as Brad was saying, kind of rack and stack them up, and then he'll have to pick 10 to forward to the committee. That doesn't guarantee that all 10 of those will be funded by the committee, but he'll have to submit 10. And we were saying, Steve and I were saying, Commissioner, before you came in too, that we don't know yet, the committee hasn't finalized its rules on which accounts in the federal budget will be earmarked this year. You know, there were a large number before. They're talking in this cycle, maybe only starting with a few, anywhere from 6 to 12 accounts that would be earmarked. There likely will be something in transportation that seemed to be a popular earmark target before. So that's why Congressman Christ has a March 19th deadline to get all their project requests into him so he and his staff can evaluate what they're going to move forward to the committee. We've talked to him already about some PSTA ideas. And so they're aware of some of the things that you all are thinking about. So they're on the lookout for them.
Excellent. You kind of answered my second question, which was, it's 10 throughout the federal budget, or it's 10 per?
10 throughout all the discretionary pots that they could oversee. So you could submit one transportation or you could submit 10 transportation, whatever, but it's across all the appropriations bills. And there's also, each member of Congress will have a dollar limit that they're able to receive in earmark funding. So we don't know what that number is yet, but there'll be a maximum amount of projects they can submit and a maximum amount of funding that they can receive for the projects that are funded. So a member of Congress conceivably could submit 10 projects and have one large one and get all of his money into one project, or he could spread them out and get 10 smaller projects. It's kind of it's the first time around we've done this in 11 years, so it's going to be a little learning on the go here, but we'll continue to work with the staff, you and the staff, to try and figure it out.
While it's learning on the go, it sounds as though it's going to be incredibly strategic in terms of how they approach it. And I would like to suggest, from a 100,000-mile view, that we think that way as well. And since there's so many different transit-oriented entities within our county, it might be very wise to convene a transit high-level CEO brainstorming session so that we can be collaborative and focus on those projects that we think have the biggest, best opportunity to be successful. And I would think in doing that there's probably, if I think back to how they really focus on who gets what, there's probably some very strategic measurements and benchmarks that we would want to be able to focus on. Do we know yet what those might be?
No, but one of the criteria, one of the things that's in the House rules that it's going to dictate how the earmarks are distributed is they want to see support within the community for the request. So in fact, if you look at the application from Congressman Christ, they want letters of support for each of these projects that he's going to request. So they're going to want to see, in PSTA's case, that the chambers or other organizations are endorsing the earmark request you're making. And so I think, I don't know that there's a numerical number that they're using to dictate what's a good project and not, but they do want to see broad community support for what you're trying to do. And I think that bodes well for what you all are trying to do with PSTA.
So it probably mirrors the process and the things that we did to get the money for the Sunrunner line, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so you have affirmed, both you and Steve, to be involved in the meeting that we have with the Federal Transit people coming up on March 11th, yes?
Yes, we have.
Yes.
Great. And then you are aware, I'm assuming, that we have our federal delegation meeting targeted for April 8th, which is a little bit after, well, obviously, it's after the deadline that Congressman Christ has established for getting our needs in. So do you think that once we have that federal delegation meeting, there might be an opportunity to either expand or contract our wish list? I'm just trying to anticipate every possible hiccup.
My guess, he probably won't have submitted his request to the committee by April 8th, I don't think. My guess is that's probably a little early because the president's budget is probably not going to come out till later in April or even early May at this point. So that my guess is the Appropriations Committee won't ask for lists from members of Congress until they at least see the president's budget. But I think April 8th is fine. I think there'll still be, and what we might want to do is have a meeting with Congressman Chris and the staff before April 8th on what you're submitting to them. I think I'd recommend that when you submit your requests, we ought to brief his staff and the congressman at some point on the PSTA requests.
Excellent. Great. Any other questions for Harry or Steve, anybody? Thank you for the great job you did before I got here, Commissioner. I'm very grateful.
You're welcome.
It takes a team
That's right. Sure does.
to win the war. Okay, anything else from Harry and Steve? Nothing?
Nothing. That's not on my end.
What's the
Thank you.
temperature in DC today?
Sunny and about 50. Not bad.
Oh, well, it's about 85 or 88 here in St. Pete today by noon. So, and bright and sunny, just so you know. If you
That's
wanna-
why Harry's down there now. I
If
appreciate
you want to
that.
come
Thank you.
visit. All right, next on our agenda is Ron Pierce, correct?
Yes, and actually, good morning, Ron. We also have Whitney, Fox, and Cassandra, and I think Whitney is maybe going to share, and Ron, feel free to chime in on this too, but Whitney's going to kind of share a little presentation about sort of the PSA priorities and the update as we get into the session, how we're, I think, capitalizing on the virtual Tallahassee Day with a broader effort to be successful. And then Ron, you can kind of chime in on, latest news and updates on these things.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Julie, are you going to share the presentation or would you like me to?
I can share it. I'm ready if you'd like.
Okay, sure. Go ahead. Thanks, Julie. And like Brad said, this is conversational. So Ron, or if anyone would like to chime in, please feel free to do so. But we wanted to give an update not only on obviously the priorities, but kind of where we are in the efforts that we've been making and what the next steps are. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Julie. So since this legislative committee and the board approved our 10 legislative priorities, we've really been working hard alongside our lobbyists, of course, to move them forward. We did have our Tallahassee Day on February 9th, and huge thanks to Dan Saraki for attending all of the meetings for the entire day. That was a very long day, and it was such a pleasure having you in those meetings, and I feel like that was a great experience and really showed your support during them. So thank you so much for that. And like I said, I'd like to just go through the 10 priorities and give you updates on each one and the status of our efforts. We've really decided to take a three-pronged approach with our priorities, such as asking influential legislators to write letters of support, of course, doing our due diligence and research, such as answering legislators' questions, hunting down all the details, meeting with administration officials, et cetera, and then highlighting support from our community partners beyond legislators to our community partners like chambers, business associations, and cities. And a lot of this effort is really, we need to give thanks to Gina Driscoll for really pushing us to make sure that we're coordinating and that we're making sure that we are taking the momentum from our Tallahassee Day and keeping it moving forward so that it doesn't die. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Cassandra to give you updates. She's going to present with me. Oh, you're on mute, Cassandra.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. The number one priority for PSTA at the state level is making sure that the Sunrunner is up and running and the construction goes well. We have been talking to the Florida Department of Transportation for a number of years about supporting our service development funding for this project. We have asked for a total of $4.2 million to help the initial operations, and they have allocated $1.9 million. We've had several good meetings with the DOT, both at the district level and at the state, to request the balance of that $2.3 million. This is something that has precedence at the state level to support this kind of funding and at this level for such an important statewide project. And so we will be seeking letters of support from local legislators in order to solidify that ask and the continued support of the Florida Department of Transportation. Next slide, please.
Like Cassandra said, that is our number one priority that we are concentrating on. Of course, number two is our VW settlement funds for electric transit buses. So we had an informative discussion on February 9th during our Tallahassee Day with Hastings Reeves from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, who informed us that the DEP is prioritizing electric school buses using these anti-pollution settlement funds. Over half of the funds have already been allocated just to school buses. So I want you to keep in mind that in Pinellas County, a PSTA transit bus actually travels more than 3 times as many miles as a school bus annually and is on the road more than twice as long each day. So Brad informed the FPTA, they had their lobbyists talk with Noah Valentine, the Florida DEP chair, who said the governor's office really supported only school buses because there's more support for the governor in the rural areas where school buses are versus urban cities where transit is. So Ron and RSA is trying to get us a meeting with Noah Valentine, the chief at the DEP, and Brad met with Duke Energy's Jeff Baker, the community liaison, who connected RSA with Duke's Tallahassee lobbyists to support PSTA in these efforts. So RSA is working on getting other information such as school bus allocations that have been made in Pinellas and Hillsborough as well. Next slide, please.
So our next priority is looking at how our transportation disadvantage funds are able to be used. We currently get formula dollars as well as discretionary dollars from this program. But especially during COVID, where some of our innovative programs were slow to restart, we were not able to use all of the money within the time frame allotted. And the issue really is that the Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged limits their funding to their fiscal year. This could be a big issue when we don't exhaust the entire funding opportunity from the grant, and that money does not roll over. And so we need to ask our lobbyists, ask RSA to discuss this with the Senate as to why these grants, unlike any others across the state, are not able to be used past the fiscal year of the commission. Next slide, please.
So our fourth priority is looking pretty good. The state DOT is saying they don't think they will have to cut transit further. And that's, of course, this year. Because of the budget cuts, there was talk about our block grant that helps fund our operations and that it might have been cut. But FDOT District 7 was able to find other funding in order for us to stay whole. Now, other districts were not so lucky, and while we are safe this year, we need to make sure we stay vigilant and to ensure that the block grant funding does not fall. Next slide, please.
This is one of the biggest projects that PSTA is working on right now. The new Clearwater Transportation Center is our number one capital ask, especially at the federal level. When Steve talked about the build grant, we are all set and ready to apply for these funds at the federal level. It does require that we solidify our support from the city of Clearwater and the discussion that we're having with them about the land for this project. We also do have a $2.3 million grant that was given to us from FDOT through their intermodal funds, and so thank you to the district for that. We will continue to look for support from our state legislator as well as community groups in the city of Clearwater for this project to come to its fruition. Next slide, please. So we are also working very closely with the city of Clearwater and the city of Dunedin on looking at how we enhance the existing Clearwater ferry and make sure that it can continue as part of the public transportation in Pinellas County. We have engaged a consultant to look at the capital needs for this, and we will be applying for a federal grant, but at the state level, we'll be seeking service development funds from the DOT in order to support continued operation of the Clearwater ferry. Next slide, please.
Moving right along, our priority number 7, we are working on helping draft a letter of support and working with Senator Jeff Brandes and possibly others. And the letters to FDOT Secretary Thibault would ask the DOT to prioritize establishing funding that we could seek for more successful AV pilot programs like PSTA's successful AVA pilot. We've had 2 meetings with FDOT and the PSTA staff to discuss this, and the BEEP state lobbyists also are advocating with us, with the DOT to create a pilot funding stream as well. Next slide, please. For Medicaid transportation reform, we are working on letters of support from the Pinellas County delegation, hopefully with a deadline of May. And letters of support would go to the head of ACA for reforming and improving the state's brokered transportation system for Medicaid recipients. Brad has been working with FPTA, who has sent multiple requests to ACA to start state review up again soon. Next slide, please. And number 9, as far as our expediting FDOT's rulemaking updates of 1490 to allow TNC partnerships, we've been doing a lot of research and trying to secure legal analysis or talk with FDOT lawyers about any hangups they're having to allow state DOT funds to be used on TNCs. And if we're going to make a change to state law, what would we have to change for TNCs to be able to spend those dollars? If new legislation is needed to fix the issue, we will be asking Senator Brandes, who's offered to file any legislation needed to move this forward. Brad actually has a meeting tomorrow with our PSTA legal to identify a solution, and then is requesting a meeting with FDOT, and then working, of course, to draft an amendment for Senator Brandes. Next slide, please.
And lastly, and certainly not least, this has been an important issue for both us and for Forward Pinellas, is we need to ask FDOT to look at the flexibility of highway dollars coming to other forms of transportation. It is critical for Pinellas County to be able to allocate these dollars to the most pressing needs of our county. And while we do receive a number of formula dollars because of our population, as we get deeper and deeper into the inability for us to expand the roadways, flexing those dollars to public transportation will become increasingly important. As we've seen in outer years of the long-range transportation plan, if we do not have this ability to flex these dollars, Pinellas County may have to return formula dollars to the state. And so this is a critical policy discussion that needs to happen and needs to happen quickly. Next slide, please.
And Brad has a meeting with FDOT District Secretary David Gwynn on Thursday to find out more about what he's hearing for this is flexibility or others. So that's just a quick recap. We wanted to make sure we brought everyone up to speed on the efforts we've been making over the past month or two and the next steps that we are taking going forward to once again keep that momentum going as we work with Ron and his team on these priorities that you've established. And we're obviously here to answer any questions that you might have, or Ron, if you wanted to add anything to the report.
Ron, this is the time when you say staff did an excellent job.
Staff did an incredible job. I'm just going to sit back and put myself back on mute.
So I have a question. Is this, are all these things on here, these are our legislative priorities?
Yes. And Brad, during the legislative day, he did that PowerPoint all day long.
This is the board-adopted legislative priorities for 2021. Now,
Yep.
obviously,
Well, I saw 10 slides on here with 10 priorities, which are these, I'm assuming they're all woven into the top 3 that we focused on during our during our developing of the legislative platform?
yes, as Cassandra and Whitney outlined, they're in priority order. And,
So this is the marketing and communication team's efforts to take us into the weeds on the details, correct?
yes, it essentially is trying to not just have, we had a fantastic get-together with the legislators, and each year we do that. We talk to them and tell them about our priorities, but this was an effort to kind of get into more of the details about exactly how they can help us, and can they write letters, can we put them to good use with the DOT, et cetera, to actually get some of these things accomplished. That's sort of the idea, is to expand our legislative advocacy in more meaningful ways that the legislators can really help, and then they want to help, as you know. So,
Ron?
Yes, ma'am.
So, continue. I'm assuming you have some, I mean, I guess I'm a little lost at words, but.
Well, Commissioner, if we remember on the legislative agenda that you approved, there was a number of funding issues that were kind of tied into 1 or 2 areas. What we've now done is kind of broken all of those out, where you can see each individual one and kind of where we are in each of the projects with regards to letters of support, working with state, and also working with the federal government on getting funding. So you're right. I think there was 3 or 4 silos we approved as a board, and what we've now done is taken some of those funding ones, and the staff has done a great job of breaking those out, where we can kind of look at them individually and what our game plan is at each individual one, because most of them have different deadlines. So because of the deadlines, we want to make sure we're staying on top of getting letters of support and what the deadlines are for the state and for the federal government.
and to Ron's point, and we have, I can't remember the number of state representatives in Pinellas County, but we met with most of them and 3 senators. And so, some of our priorities are very focused on Clearwater. Some are in St. Petersburg. So we've sort of done like a matrix of which senator and representative, and then they themselves have their own interests that they told Ron and all of us. And so we've kind of laid it out so that each legislator, we try to address what they were interested in and see how they can help us in that area. It might just be the Clearwater, like the Clearwater Ferry project, or, it might be just one thing that we ask them to do.
And so, knowing how the legislature works, Ron, are you, in your follow-up, are surely not going into the weeds like this, correct?
No, ma'am, and there's a few things on there that are specific, with regards to For example, the rulemaking process with DOT on TNCs, we've been having conversations there, because that may end up being an amendment. Having some conversations around policy as it specifically relates to making TD grants multi-year. We've had multiple conversations there, and having conversations about more flexibility on SIS funding as well, which is something that DOT has been talking about. Those are the conversations we're really having in Tallahassee. Most of the other ones, we're working with the delegation on letters of support or starting to set the table for next year for future issues.
Thank you so much for saying that last piece, because I was sitting here like starting to actually have a little bit of a hot flash, quite frankly. So, thank you. Okay, I feel much better now. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I have one question.
Yeah.
Ron, during legislative day, when we were on that call all day, we discussed with DOT the VW settlement funding. Have you heard any updates on that? He kind of gave us a little bit of a runaround.
Yeah.
No, so the short answer is no. So what we're doing right now is 83 of the 166 million has been allocated specifically for school buses. As Whitney and Cassandra kind of alluded to, they have not made any decisions moving forward on the initial 83, as you heard. We've heard that they're going to continue to make school buses a priority. The short answer is that 83 million has not been allocated yet. They need legislative approval to do that, which is about to happen. That's what we're trying to meet with the DEP secretary, as well as the governor's offices, by the way, to make sure that they understand the importance of transit buses, and that really probably from a return on investment standpoint, they're probably going to get better return on investment with transit buses versus school buses. And the other thing we're trying to determine as well is what have they already done in Hillsborough and Pinellas County? So we've actually requested the list of the 83 million, correct me if I'm wrong, Whitney, I think they've spent, like, there's 58 or 60 million that has been out the door. The rest is about to be out the door.
Yeah.
So we want to see of that 60 million that's already been spent, how much has actually landed in Tampa Bay as well.
Perfect, thank you.
So, anyone else
Nope.
have a question? Anyone else? Gina?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So having had these first couple of rounds of discussions with legislators, do you see is there anything you would change about how we've ranked our priorities?
I'll jump in, and I mean, I know that we had a number of people that were on that call all day. I think the one thing that the delegation really appreciated, by the way, Gina, is the fact that we didn't show up asking for money this year for a specific project.
Right.
I think they appreciated that, because in a bad budget year, it's never good to be, trying to show up and looking for, a specific project. So living within the means of DOT grants and trying to support projects that we can get funded through existing funding streams, I think they really, really appreciated. And then the couple of policy areas we're focusing on as well. Look, we said this early on in the legislative process, back in, at the beginning of the committee process, not a great year to be talking about money, but a great year to be talking about policy. And so we're hopeful that some of the other policy areas we're working on, which again, I think legislators want to be supportive of. Senator Brandes has basically told us that on the TNC issue we're having with DOT is just give him language. And so we're trying to work with DOT to kind of see what that language would look like. So I think the agenda itself, the way it turned out, is great. I think the legislators, the delegation supports that and appreciates the direction we're going. But more importantly, I like how we're doing business differently this year with your support and others of using our Tallahassee trip as almost a springboard to continue to provide updates to you and the board.
Great. Well, it sounds like you gave us great advice in prioritizing policy over funding issues, so thank you for that. Are there any of these items, having had these conversations, that you feel are pretty weak at this point in terms of what their chances are?
They're not far enough along yet.
Yeah, we're not far enough along. I mean, the one area I will tell you is we got a little bit of pushback on transportation disadvantage funding, make it longer than 1 year. We're getting some pushback there. And I'll make a long story really short, kind of we're getting long on time here, is DOT grants typically are used for construction for the most part, or for studies. And that's why they can use multiple years to be able to use those grants. transportation disadvantage dollars are typically only used for services.
Right.
And the state only funds those services in 1 year allocations, because you have services for this year, and then, then you come back and you fund services for the following year based upon, either a formula or allocation, whatever that may be. So, there's some talk about if we start carrying over dollars, does it hurt small counties? If you carry over dollars, does it hurt your next year's funding? For example, one of the examples was given, if I'm just making the numbers up, if we get $1 million this year, we have 250,000 we're going to carry forward. They may only give us 750 the following year, and then because we got another 250 that we're withholding. So, I think the approach, and Brad and the team sent me some really good talking points, is we want to do this for 1 year, 1 year only, due to what's happened over the last year due to services based upon COVID. And so we're kind of revisiting that. I think the next steps are going to be visiting with the Transportation Disadvantaged Commission, and then we'll get DOT in the loop. And so those conversations will happen over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, great. So if we can get the 1 year, I mean, that's good. We'll take it. And if the priority is really on construction projects rather than services, because of the nature of the service that's provided here, I wonder if we might explore other potential funding sources and ask for a different type of allocation. So just
Well, yeah.
something we can think about as we go forward. If this isn't the right fit for the type of project that is approved or typically supported there, then perhaps we look elsewhere. It looks like Cassandra has her hand up to speak.
Well, I'll let Brad make sure that Brad speaks first, but a number of these projects are DOT funded. And when we discuss this with the DOT, we make our asks known sometimes years in advance. And we are told sometimes to allow them to figure out how to fund it, because often they will find a different funding source than we haven't thought about, or find a different pot of money. And so I think that's important to make our asks known early and often. So the Sunrunner continues to be our #1 service development grant ask to the DOT, and they are looking for the money. The discussion with legislators definitely improves our chances of achieving those goals that we have within each one of those grant programs.
Okay.
On the transportation disadvantaged funding, though, it's been kind of an interesting, I've been learning a lot about it too. Even though it is a subset of the Department of Transportation, it is completely independent. The Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged staff is in a separate building. They have their own commission that they report to. And at the public hearing last week where PSTA got up and testified, the Florida DOT testified, had their 3 minutes. The Florida DOT representative came up and advocated for our position to extend grants, and they didn't seem to listen to the DOT any more than they listened to us. It didn't seem like they were really very open-minded. But as Ron has been talking to the folks in the Capitol, the House and the Senate staff, and because of their funding streams and things like that, it's just a little bit different than the DOT. I don't know if there's really another alternative source for transportation, the programs that we fund with transportation disadvantage dollars. I'm not giving up on that. It seems like I have some ideas on how they can maybe think a little bit more broadly, but so far I'm just experiencing some closed-mindedness that I'm trying to navigate myself through with my charm and beauty and all my abilities. And Ron Fierce.
And with his charm and beauty.
Exactly. Now,
We're in trouble then, so.
you asked about the issues that I feel like I'm worried about. It's the VW settlement funding that Commissioner Saraki and Ron said. I know that the city, when I think Whitney presented to the City Council of St. Petersburg, they were very supportive of VW, more electric buses. And lots of the legislators are supportive of it. And Ben Diamond even told us that he's been in discussions about it. It's just this news that they are allocating the money kind of to just school buses. They've made a decision to just, fund electric school buses and not transit buses, which, they're certainly allowed. It's just, the priority said buses, didn't say what kind. And, but as Whitney pointed out, some of the research we did, it's just the number of miles that a transit bus runs compared to a school bus runs.
Right.
And all day, and therefore the pollution is actually, there's more pollution coming out of the transit buses in Pinellas County than there are the school buses, even though there are more school buses. That's not necessarily the case in the more rural areas where there's hardly any transit buses and there's still school buses. And they just seem to have a priority of putting the money toward electric school buses. So I thought we came up with a pretty good strategy to try to get Duke Energy on our side, because the gentleman with the DEP even suggested that, so we did that. So their lobbyists are now engaged on this. And any other ideas we have on how we might sway or get letters of support from we're going to get letters to hopefully get this legislative session, maybe our legislators can chime in, and that will change, as Commissioner Long and Ron said, it's still early.
Yeah.
We still have a lot to go.
Okay, could I interrupt, please? Because we're going to run out of time if we keep this
Thank you, I'm
banter going
finished.
back
Thank you.
and forth.
Thank you.
Hey, Ron,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm thinking here that, and I'm wondering if you've heard any conversations from Tallahassee. There's a very good possibility that the new infrastructure package from the feds is going to float $16 billion down to Florida. Are you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am, and also, not only the infrastructure package, but what is the, out of the next stimulus package, which I'll let, Steve and Harry weigh in on. If there's additional dollars for state and local government, there's some funding opportunities there for the state too.
So my thought is, given that that happens, it's my understanding from the economic forecasts that Amy does every year, that that'll wipe out the $2 billion shortfall in the state budget. And to me, that ought to be a great opportunity for us to be able to get some really good, positive, things for PSTA and for our county. And with that thought in mind, what are you hearing? And I have another agenda that I'm thinking about in terms of this question. Have you heard any of the local discussions over in Hillsborough about the All for Transportation plans? My understanding is that they are planning on going out for referendum to put that right back in front of the voters, correct?
Absolutely, they will. I know the county commission is planning to put it back on the ballot for 2022. The really big question now, Commissioner, is going to be the $76 million that's been collected to date. How can those dollars be spent? And I think that may end up being a little bit of a legal fight on how those dollars should or could be spent on within Hillsborough County's budget. If transportation is appropriate, if not appropriate, how else would they spend those dollars?
And the court ruling was silent on that, right?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Those are the end of my questions, but I do think that the future is very, very bright and that we've got to be very, very strategic going forward, both with the state legislature, with the feds, and also in collaboration with the rest of our entities, because I'm sitting here thinking about, I'm getting stuck in the middle of a lot of conflicting agendas, and that's going to be problematic going forward, for me at least, as a county commissioner. Just FYI. Okay?
Yep.
Any further discussion, or? Brad, Gina, do you want to carry on now that I've had an opportunity to put my
No, thank you.
thoughts on the record? Okay, so do we have any other business to come before us this morning? Anything? Well, good job, everybody. Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Whitney, for all your hard work. Thank you,
Good luck,
Cassandra,
Ron,
for
up there in
Thank you, guys.
Tallahassee.
keeping
Thank you.
us focused on the details. Take care and be safe, and most of all, stay healthy, everybody. All right?
Awesome, thank you.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. We'll talk later.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Okay.
Janet, you mentioned there's a meeting on March 11th, DOT. Is that like a Zoom meeting or is that a live meeting?
What was I talking about? Oh, that's a meeting.
At the meeting, okay. I'm just interested, I think this is a great educational learning experience for me, and